Okay, we're looking for a problem that's similar to 4A. So I'm going to go and see if I can find something in the back of chapter 13. Page 562, and it looks like technical problem number 6. So that should have answers in the back. I don't know if I mentioned this trick to you guys, but I want to do low, medium, and high this way. So I'll copy these, and instead of just pasting it, I'm going to transpose it, which you can either do with this little icon here, or you can paste special and transpose. And it copies everything that was in a row format into a column format, so that'll save me some time. My question is, in the first round of strategy elimination, which ad budget would the companies exclude? After the first round, would either company make a second round? We'll just try to answer the questions as they appear in question 6, and hopefully that will help everyone out. Does Coke have a dominated strategy? So Coke's going to be my first set of numbers here. And in the book, it's bolded, and then in the Pepsi's payoff will be the right-hand side numbers, or the kind of the brown font. Let's see if Pepsi wants to stay low. Pepsi's going to do this low payoff. Then Coke would say, well, my best choice is to do medium. So I'm going to, maybe I can do this. If I underline that, it'll let you. So if Pepsi does low, then Coke's going to want to do medium, because that's its best payoff out of the, again, if Pepsi does low, then Coke's choosing between low, medium, and high. So Coke's payoff are these numbers here on the left. So if Pepsi does low, Coke chooses between, do we want a $400 payoff, $500 payoff, or $375 payoff? And again, these are all payoffs in these tables here, these numbers. So Coke would say, well, we'd rather get the $500 payoff. That's the best compared to $400 or $375. So if Pepsi does low, Coke wants to do medium. If Pepsi does medium, then Coke would say, well, what do we want to do? If we do low, we get $320. If we do medium, we get $450. If we do high, we get $300. So again, the $450 looks to be the best. If Pepsi does high, then Coke says, well, if we do low, we get $560. If we do medium, we get $540. If we do high, we get $525. So it looks like here, Coke's best option is to choose low if Pepsi does high. So just that first set of things that we've done, I can answer this first question. Does Coke have a dominated strategy? And we'd say yes, because it never wants to pick the high price. Regardless of what Pepsi did, Coke would never want to pick a high price. All right, so let's do part B. Does Pepsi have a dominated strategy? So we're trying to figure out which low, medium, or high does Pepsi want to do. So then you take each of Coke's cases individually and decide what Pepsi would prefer. So if Coke were to do low, then Pepsi looks at $400 versus $720 versus $600. So Pepsi would obviously want to get the $720 and charge medium if Coke was doing low, because that's better than the $600 or the $400. So I will underline that. If Coke does medium, then again, Pepsi's deciding, well, do we want to do low, medium, or high? So it looks at $300 versus $525 versus $500. So it says this $525 is best. And then down here, if Coke were to do high, we already know Coke's not going to do that, but we just want to go through all of them and see what's going to happen. So, because again, we describe this as a simultaneous game where neither side is really sure what the other is going to do. So maybe Pepsi doesn't quite know that Coke has this dominated strategy yet. So they're just they see this payoff matrix and they just want to cover all their bases. So if Coke were to do high, then Pepsi would choose between $420, $378, or $750. Obviously the $750 is the best. And I hope I typed all these numbers incorrectly. If I typed them wrong, then we could have some trouble later. So does Pepsi have a dominated strategy? Well, again, if Coke did low, then it did medium. If Coke did medium, then Pepsi did medium. If Coke did high, Pepsi did high. So it looks like for Pepsi never chose the low price strategy. So low price for Pepsi is dominated. So we could think of that as our first round of eliminations. We've gone through our first round, and the first question on your assignment, part A, was in the first round of strategy elimination, which ad budget would the companies exclude. So when I word it like that, I'm describing it as what I've just done now. So I've looked at each of the different strategies that each company has and gone through like a first step. So you know, what's Coke going to do if Pepsi does each thing, and then what's Pepsi want to do if Coke does each thing. So that's kind of the first round that happens because they're perceiving all of the possible prices that are there. But now we know that Coke's never going to choose high and Pepsi's never going to choose low. In the question, describe the strategic situation facing Coke and Pepsi in the reduced payoff table. Well, the reduced payoff table is going to be the table that doesn't have any of the things that are crossed out, which will be this box B, C, E, and F. And I'm going to get rid of my underlines because I don't know, those might not be underlined anymore. Again, these were choices that these companies made given the full table, but they may not be the optimal choices now that we have this reduced table. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete my little underlines that I did. But again, I have this reduced table because I've gotten rid of the dominated strategies. And so the only thing that's left, again, is this box B, C, E, and F, with Coke doing low and medium or Pepsi doing medium and high. So we could go ahead and do the same thing. So we'll do Coke first. If Coke's trying to figure out what to do. If Pepsi were to do medium, then Coke's figuring, well, do we want to do low or medium ourselves? So we're thinking between 320 and 450. So Coke would obviously prefer to do medium and get 450. Then Coke says, if Pepsi does high, would we want 560 or 540? And so Coke would rather do 560. Pepsi says, well, what if Coke does low? So this is kind of our second round set of decisions. Again, in the, I just said, okay, would either company make a second round elimination? So we're trying to figure out if there's going to be any second round eliminations now. So Pepsi says, if Coke does low, then would we want 720 or 600? So Pepsi would want 720. Pepsi says, well, if Coke does medium, do we want to receive 525 or 500? So Coke says we would want 525. I can underline that again. And I guess I underlined all the same numbers again. So what is the likely outcome of this advertising problem? Well, actually, we'd see that neither of them would want to be in box F. And we can see both of their options would end up putting them in box E, which I guess is sort of similar to. So we could do more deletions if we wanted to, because we could say for Coke there was a situation for Coke where they would pick the medium option one, if Pepsi did medium, but then Coke would also choose the low option if Pepsi did high. So Coke sort of has both of these options available to it, depending on what Pepsi does. If Pepsi does medium, Coke would choose medium. If Pepsi did high, Coke would choose low. So Coke does not have a dominated strategy in the second round. I should type that out too. But Pepsi said, well, if Coke did low, we would do medium. And if Coke did medium, we would also do medium. Pepsi never wants to pick high. And we could just, if we want to be complete, does have a dominant strategy.
Oh, okay. That makes more sense.
So since we said Pepsi we could do a third round if we wanted to. Because Pepsi has a dominated strategy of high, we could go ahead and get rid of these. Down. And then it would just be Pepsi's only choice now is to charge medium. And then it's just, well, I guess I should write all this out too. After second round elimination, which is Pepsi getting rid of high, then Pepsi only chooses medium. So Pepsi really doesn't have a choice anymore. Pepsi's always going to do this medium option. And so it ends up just falling to Coke as to what they want to do. So what does Coke want to do? So if Pepsi does medium, Coke wants to do medium also. Because Coke wants to get, again, if Pepsi's going to do medium, then Coke says, well, 320, 450, we'd rather do 450. So we can kind of highlight this. Part E is saying that Pepsi's highest payoff occurs when Coke and Pepsi both choose high. So if you look at either, I already X'd it out here, of all of the brown font payoffs in the table from the beginning, the highest one is 750 in box I. I mean, we get close in box B with 720, and then, there's other places where it's lower than that, but Box I is the highest payoff for Pepsi. So again, if we don't know anything about playing these games or these strategies, then people might just say, well, the best payoff for Pepsi is to choose high. So why doesn't Pepsi just choose a high budget? And again, you might say also the highest payoff for Coke looks like it's high also in box C because it gets $560 of a payoff. So if you're just looking at all these possible payoffs and just trying to find the highest one, then we might end up saying, well, Pepsi should charge a high budget. It looks like Coke would do a low budget. I think I said high before. Coke would do a low budget to get in box C and get a $560 payoff. So we might end up, if we didn't know anything about these strategies, we might end up concluding that, well, Pepsi should do high and Coke should do low, which would be box C. But we saw that that was eliminated in the second round. So even though it's the best payoff for both, it's not going to be the option that results. It's not going to be the option that falls out of these strategy eliminations. We know the most likely result, like it says in part D, the most likely outcome is going to be both of them doing medium. If Pepsi tried to do what was best for them, then wouldn't that just be best? And we ended up seeing that, well, that's not actually going to happen. What's going to happen is that Pepsi's going to end up, the outcome that's going to result is an outcome that is not optimal for either of them. So being in this medium box E is not the highest payoff for either Coke or Pepsi, but it is the outcome that's going to result.